Welcome, everyone, to another day of Bhagavad Gita Sadhana, and welcome to the sun. It's another beautiful, glorious day to learn about the self, yourself, in the context of the Bhagavad Gita. I'm Atmadarshan, or Laura, and set off by a question by one of the wonderful viewers. Thank you for the question. We're going to spend another day here kind of interrupting our long-standing theme of samatvam in the Bhagavad Gita, although this relates to it, to look at the idea of spiritual maturity. Because the Gita can be read as many things, an historical poem, just a poem. It's also kind of an outline of the spiritual journey that we all take, and it starts with suffering. The first chapter is the yoga of Arjun's despondency or despair, or you could even say suffering. And that's something that we often try to cover up in the West is our suffering and just go to the good stuff. Oh, I'm a little uncomfortable. Got to do something about it. Discomfort, no, cannot be tolerated for any reason. But discomfort is a great teacher. And we'll talk about that today. So yesterday I talked about with spiritual maturity comes the ability to see things less in black and white and more in shades of gray. And how you navigate those shades of gray comes back to who you know yourself to be. Okay, for example, the political races, they're all over the place everywhere. I know from myself, I could never, I shouldn't say never, but man, running for politics would be very much against my nature. So, and to those for whom it is their nature, you got a pathway. Kudos. But another aspect of spiritual maturity that we often try to deprive ourselves and others of is being able to see and accept the consequences of what we're going to do. So the Gita starts, actually, the first person to speak in it is Dhritarashtra, a blind king whose indulgences of his selfish son have whose indulgences of his selfish son have led the country, the empire, to a brink of civil war. It's got to do with choices he made decades ago. And just before the Gita starts, the Gita's author, Vedavyas, shows up and says to the blind king Dhritarashtra, he's symbolically blind. He represents our ego, who is blind often to the suffering of others, or to, in this case, the consequences of our choices. So Vedavyas, the poem's author, says to the blind king Dhritarashtra, I will give you divine sight so that you can see the outcome of the battle, you can see the battlefield, everything that happens there, and basically see the results of what you selected to do. And Dhritarashtra, given the opportunity to have not just sight, but this special divine sight, says, no, give it to this guy here. Give it to Sanjay. He drives my chariot and stuff, and let him have it. Then he can tell me what he experiences, what he sees going on. And so Sanjay's like, woo, cool, divine sight. And he does narrate the Gita to Dhritarashtra. This relates so heavily to us in our lives. Dhritarashtra does not want to accept. He knows that everything he's done means that his sons have set themselves up for defeat in this civil war that's inevitable, and that he's going to lose them all to death. Yet he hopes beyond hope that something's going to be different, and he doesn't want to see the true consequences of his choices unfurling. So he stays blind and hopeful, and he gets his information filtered through someone else. This is very much a metaphor, an analogy, whatever you want to call it, for our daily lives. We make choices, not just choices today, but choices we've made going back years and decades that are going to play out. And do we want to turn a blind eye? we can see this sometimes with children. We have children, and if they make a choice that brings harsh consequences, do we let them experience those consequences, or do we try to protect them from it? And then we can do it. The ego does this for ourselves. I've made these choices, but why is this happening to me or to my country? Well, with the political situations that surround many major elections, I'm thinking here in this country and how the recent assassination attempt just kind of showed us the amount of division and animosity between people voting for someone to lead the country. And I hear people say, how did it get to this? How did it get to this place where we're so divided and we have such enmity toward each other to the point where somebody wants to kill another person over an election? And I encourage, okay, so there's personal karma and there's group karma. So everyone who lives in the United States or considers themselves part of this country, I encourage you to look at how you are treating others who are not of the same political beliefs that you have. Are you using harsh rhetoric in your social media posts? Are you cutting off neighbors, not reaching out to them because you feel they have different political beliefs? Are you criticizing people? Are you belittling people? Are you telling people they're stupid for their beliefs? Because if you are, what you're seeing is the consequences of those actions on a grand scale. Now, this can be horrifying and be like, oh, I'm to blame, but it's also empowering because instead of just being swept along, we each have the opportunity to do something about it. And I'm using the political stage because it's so obvious and charged, but anything you do in life, do you want people to treat you nicely? How are you treating people? Do you want people to drive more considerately? How do you drive? Etc. What you're seeing in your life now, the consequences of choices you've made before, they're going to play out. Are you going to see, like, are you going to experience them yourselves, or are you going to get them through the filter of your favorite news source or your favorite gossip? Are you going to see them directly and be like, dang, it's hard? But that's spiritual maturity, is going, I made these choices in the past. There are consequences. I'm going to experience those consequences and use that wisdom to do better next time. Instead of, dang, there are consequences. How can I escape them? How can I put them off? I don't want to see them. How can I spare others from the consequences of their actions? It just doesn't. I would love you to consider that for the long run. If we were all saved from the consequences of our actions all the time, would we ever learn? So today's practice is dedicated to Paul, who passed away many years ago, and this is in his memory. And for all of you, as we do our asana, I've mentioned my knee. My knee hurting right now is the result of choices I've made over decades. And it's lovely. Thank you all for hoping it gets better. The way it's going to get better is for me to go, I basically abused my body for years. And now I have to listen to it and figure out what to do going forward. So we can look at that in the physical sense. And then when we get to the contemplation, I'm going to encourage you to think of something you're doing currently in your life, and for 5 minutes sit there and let it play out in your mind. How does this little thing affect not only you but everything around you? What are going to be the consequences? And to sit there and really notice, and then use that information to decide, do I want to keep doing that, or do I want to try something else? It's up to you. That's another part of spiritual maturity. It's up to you. Nobody else. It's you. So let's do our asana, our pose. Listen to yourself. What have you done to your body over the years and decades? switch. All right, let's settle in. 5 minutes. Bring up something you're doing now in your mind. Play everything out, not just for yourself, but for your kids or anybody who's going to come after you on this planet, in this cosmos. Ooh. Welcome back. I hope that was of benefit to you. I'm going to start including that in my daily routine. So, thank you very much for being part of this. Another group to dedicate this practice to came to mind, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use the word I know for your people, which is the Iroquois, and I know that's not the most accurate. The people of the Longhouses, wonderful confederacy who hundreds of years before European settlers arrived invoked asked their people to consider the effect of each decision, not just now, but for 7 generations after. How will your actions carry out for that long? It's great exploration. We'll explore more tomorrow. So until then.